my god, we did it. The whole team here, baby.
Oh my god! Holy shit, I actually got a... Okay, so for a general sort of overview of the trick, so it saves about 3 seconds if you get him to eject really quickly, which doesn't happen all the time. There's a degree of RNG to how fast he'll eject, but if you're lucky and he does eject straight away, it'll save 3 seconds. For the trick to work, the elite that spawns in the Banshee has to be a red elite. He can be either blue or red. I'd say about 3/4 of the time he's red, so it's not too bad.
I didn't think there were any human forces left.
When you cross that loading trigger that spawns the Banshee, this one here, that's when his color gets determined. So if you're practicing this whole thing, you want to make sure your checkpoints before that loading trigger, till you're sure that it's a red elite anyway.
The weather.
Alright, so even with all the practice I've done into this trick, I'm only getting it like about 1/10 of the time I attempt it. Not very often. Then again, I'm always been bad at this kind of trick in general. Like with the original Archway Banshee grab, it took me so long to learn that. I was so bad at it for a while. I mean, kind of thing where the first few hours that you practice it, you'll just never get it at all. And after that, for a while, you'll be getting it like 1 in 10. And I think there's probably a stage after that, even with this trick, where you can get it like nearly every time, assuming you get a red elite. I haven't got to that point though. I'm terrible at this kind of precise input stuff. Maybe one of you guys will be able to though. But even 1/10 is enough to start doing it in runs, and hopefully you'll get it eventually in a run. And the trick can be divided into 2 sort of separate parts.
Seem natural, not
getting the
artificial.
Banshee stuck in the corner, and then getting to actually eject. So I'll divide my tutorial into those 2 parts. Alright, let me explain a little bit how to set up saves with custom addition or hack. So this is the corridor before going outside, right? The Banshee spawns when that loading done thing appears, and that's when his color is determined, and you need him to be a red elite, of course. So you want to make a save before crossing this load zone, which is, you know, right around here or something, so that you can get different colors every time you do it. Now, there's 2 ways to sort of know when to do the first input of the trick itself. Because you come here and you wait,
I wonder if the ring's environment systems are
and then at the right point you start moving backwards and jump. Now to know when to do that, because that's like one of the most important bits, you need to know when exactly you're going to do that. You can use either a visual cue or an audio cue. And by audio cue I mean the dialogue that Cortana's saying. You know, interesting, blah 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 blah. You can use a cue of what word she says to determine when to start going backwards, or you can just watch the Banshee and just based on where it's at and what it's doing, know when to do it. I prefer the visual cue myself. One of the advantages of the visual cue is that you can come out here, kill the grunts, stand in the corner, and then once you aim at the right place, you can make a core save like I just did. It was really quick, so you might not have seen it, but from here you can just practice with the visual cue. But you'll notice that the dialogue that Cortana's saying stops, it doesn't work anymore if you make a core save when she's in the middle of speaking. So if you want to use the audio cue instead, what you want to do is you can only start from this checkpoint, kill the grunts.
The weather patterns here seem
now if you revert to that checkpoint again when she's in the middle of the line, you'll find she actually won't play the dialogue next time around. It's weird like that. You have to kind of wait for her to finish saying it all. So to set it up to work properly, what you want to do is come wait for the dialogue to get to the next line. Sometimes it'll skip Sergeant Johnson's line too. Christ.
Roger that. Make it quick.
Should skip a whole lot of lines. So make a core save here after all the lines have finished, and revert back to your checkpoint.
interesting.
Interesting.
The weather patterns here.
And now if you revert back to the check, no, what you want to do is you want to revert to the core save first, that's after all the lines, and then revert back to the checkpoint. And that'll work every time. The dialogue, I mean.
Interesting. The weather patterns.
One thing
here
to note
seem
about the
not-
dialogue is that it doesn't start playing when you cross this loading zone, but actually when you start opening this door is what determines it.
Interesting.
But since it's usually a fairly consistent amount of ticks between this and that, it should sync up with the Banshee pretty well.
The weather patterns here seem natural, not artificial.
I much
wonder
prefer
if the
to start from
environment
here
systems are
and just
malfunctioning,
practice
or if the
the visual cue instead. Now, assuming that you are going to do the audio cue, or that you want to do like just practice of the full thing, to deal with the grunts, so dealing with the grunts, you want to come out here, it doesn't matter where you stand, shoot them both.
the weather patterns here.
Now, if there's no grunts at all, you also want to shoot, just to scare the ones that are around the
natural,
corner
not
over here.
artificial. I wonder if the ring's
But you
environment
don't want to
systems
like
are malfunctioning,
immediately
or if the
walk
designer-
out, especially if there's no grunts at the start. You don't want to immediately walk out to the position that you want to stand in, like this. You'll see what happens is, like, there's a 50-50 chance that one of the grunts is gonna come and start fucking you, basically. Didn't happen this time, but it happens quite a lot if you run out there too soon. Try to demonstrate. No, in this case it didn't. I fucked that up anyway. But, okay, so I don't have a good example to show you, but fairly often, if you run straight to the corner, a grunt here will just run up and start fucking with you. To prevent that, what you want to do is shoot the grunts or shoot the ground if there's no grunts,
The weather
wait
patterns
for
here
like
seem
half a
natural,
second and
not
then move in.
artificial. I wonder if the ring's environment systems are malfunctioning.
That's all you have to do.
Or if the designers
And that'll
wanted the
usually
installation
stop
to
him
have
from
inclement weather.
trying to fuck with you. Okay, now for the tough part, the inputs. So, like I might have said already, there's two ways to know when to start moving backwards at the start of the trick. You can either watch the Banshee and like use a visual cue, or listen to Cortana's dialogue for the audio cue. Now, what is the audio cue? So she'll say environmental systems. Let me show you.
Interesting. The weather patterns here seem natural, not artificial. I wonder if the ring's environment systems are malfunctioning.
Environment systems, whatever. So, I personally, if I'm using the audio cue, I will start moving backwards
Or if the designers
when she
wanted the
says sys
installation to
in
have
systems.
inclement weather.
Now, it depends to a degree whether you're sort of anticipating her saying it and moving before it, because I find that I do that.
The weather patterns here seem natural, not artificial. I wonder if the ring's environment systems are malfunctioning. Or if the designers wanted the
Or if you're like
installation to have
reacting to
inclement
it and like what your reaction speed is.
Fireteam Zulu requesting immediate assistance from any
So you might want to experiment with, instead of going on the sys to start moving backwards, you can go on the tim in system, or on the end of ment in environment. That's the audio cue. Now for the visual cue, which is what I prefer to use, I'm gonna come out here and come in this
The
corner
weather
and then
patterns here seem natural,
aim at the
not
right spot and make a core
artificial.
save.
I wonder
So that's the advantage to, one of the advantages to the visual cue. When practicing it, you can use a core save from this position. So saves you having to kill the grunts and walk into position every time. Now, where to aim for this?
the ring's
So,
envi-
where you aim at the start of this kind of matters, but not a whole lot.
or if the
You I use like this as a vertical lineup, but where you aim vertically doesn't actually matter at all.
This is Fireteam Zulu requesting immediate
Get lost.
assistance from any UNSC forces.
Um,
Does anyone copy? Over.
Where you aim
I
horizontally
didn't
does
think there
kind of
were any
matter
human
though.
forces left
I
on this part of the ring.
say like
Cortana
about
to Fireteam
here.
Zulu. I read you. Fireteam Zulu, this
It's
is
not super
Cortana.
precise
Hold
in this
position.
part.
We're on our way.
But okay, what is the visual cue? You see how he flicks back up after he finishes his turn? Flick. Flick. I wait for that, and then very shortly after that happens is when I'm going to start moving backwards. Explaining what the gap is just something you have to get by feel. But it getting it precise is important. There is variation to it you can have. You might have like 5 ticks between like the twist and when you start going backwards, or 7 ticks, and whether that will work or not will depend on your other inputs in the trick, like when you start moving backwards on this bit and other things. So different combinations of inputs can work, but the way I prefer to do it is I wait a certain amount of time, a short gap between when he twists up and when I start moving backwards. And then very shortly after I start moving backwards, I hit jump. It's hard to explain the timing. It's like, it's something around that. Probably none of those are exactly what it actually is. You can check the examples at the end of this video to see what the potential timings are. Okay, so once you get here, you're gonna start holding forward. You can start holding forward slightly before you hit the ground, or you can keep holding backwards for a bit longer, like that. Here's where I'll go before I hit the ground. And you can even walk so far backwards that you hit the wall behind you, if you want. Whether that will work again or not depends on the other sort of combination of inputs that you're doing in the trick. The way I prefer to do it is to walk back a little bit on the ground, not too much that I hit the wall behind me. Okay, so once you start walking forwards again, you want to jump shortly afterwards. The precise timing of this jump doesn't matter. All that matters is that you land on this beam here. At first when you start practicing this, you probably fall off the beam all the time, like this. Or you'll come too short and like just fall back in the gap here. All I can say is, as you start to practice this, this is one of the easier parts of the trick. You will get a feel for how to land back on the beam, when to stop holding W during your jump so that you don't overshoot it, or when to keep holding it so that you don't undershoot it. But it's something you'll get a feel for pretty quickly. It's not too hard. It will be at first, but trust me, you'll get a feel for it. Now, where you land on the beam, it does sort of matter, but again, you can make it work in any position, depending on what your other inputs were. One thing that does matter though, at least I'm pretty sure it matters, is that you want to be touching the wall here. God. You want to be touching this big brown wall, right?
The weather patterns
You don't want to
seem
be
natural, not artificial.
like
I wonder
away
if the
from
ring's
it like
environment
this
systems
after
are
your jump.
malfunctioning, or if the
To achieve
designers
that,
wanted the installation.
all you need to do is be aiming slightly to the left or parallel with the wall when you're jumping forwards, and you'll be probably, hopefully, touching it if you don't bounce off it too hard. So that's fairly important. I wouldn't say it's like impossible to get the trick to work if you've got a little gap. If you land on the beam and you find that you do have a little gap between you and the wall, don't try to adjust backwards to the wall. That movement will probably fuck up the trick in my experience. Just wherever you land, you're gonna have to take it. Okay, once you land, the very next thing you're gonna do is jump on the first available frame. Oh god. I swear you get a feel for it, guys. And you can start holding jump before you actually land, and it'll just automatically do it at the next possible spot, or you can just wait a little bit. All you want to do is just jump straight away. Now, I like to make a save here, because this is the like hardest sort of part of part 1 out of the way. Well, after this part of the trick, once you land, as you land or very shortly after, you're going to walk off towards here. So all together now that looks like, not like that. Like that. So If you found that
Think there
after
are any
walking
human
off,
forces left?
after making that checkpoint, that he didn't get stuck in the right position, like he's just bounced off completely here, then you want to go back to your call load and try it again. Do your inputs, come here, jump, stop, make your checkpoint. Totally safe, totally unsafe. Then walk off. Did he get stuck? No. Keep trying it. I'll fast forward through some things until I actually get it.
This is Fire Team Zulu. Requesting immediate assistance from any UNSC forces. Does anyone copy? Over.
I didn't think there were any human forces left on this part of the ring.
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you.
Here we go. It didn't take too long. So with this
Didn't think
checkpoint
there
that
were
I
any
have
human
here,
forces left on this part of the ring.
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu.
we can start talking
Didn't
about
think there were any
the
human
second
forces
part of the
left on
trick.
this-
Okay, one thing I didn't talk about is how to know that you got the Banshee stuck in the right angle. Because the Banshee can get stuck in several different angles, and only one of them will really work, which is the one I've got here.
Fire Team Zulu.
So
this
you
is
can see
Cortana.
that
Hold position. We're on our way.
I didn't think there were any human forces left.
his
on this
tail's
part
to
of
the right, and his
Cortana to
head
Fire
is
Team
down
Zulu.
and to
I
the
read
left.
you.
His tail's up and right, his head is down and left.
Fire Team Zulu. This is Cortana.
That's what you want. Alright, you can see in this example here that I've got him in the wrong angle. His head's to the right and down, but his
Cortana
tail's to
Fire
the
Team Zulu.
left.
I read you.
This is not good. You'll see, even if he moves back into what looks like the right position, it won't work now.
Roger that. Make it quick.
Alright, now for the second part of the trick, which is ejecting the pilot. This bit's a little less precise than the first part. It's also got a large degree of just straight RNG to it, which you can't really control. So once you land back on the beam, as you land, or shortly afterwards, you want to walk off roughly this direction. You don't want to start holding W before you land, because otherwise it's just going to bounce off and do some dumb shit
Cortana
like
to Fire
this.
Team Zulu.
As you land or shortly afterwards. Now you don't have to walk all the way into this corner here. Stop before. That's fine. But what you want to do now is you want to hold backwards, then jump, and then let go backwards, because you want to move over the Banshee at a certain speed, because if you move over him too fast, he'll just tell you to fuck off and like not eject properly or kill you. But you also want to land in a particular spot in the Banshee. Try to show what that spot is.
I read you. Fire Team
Holding
Zulu,
W
this is
here, and you
Cortana.
can see
Hold
that there's a
position.
little
We're on our way.
depression, a little dip around here. That's roughly where you want to land. It doesn't have to be precisely on it. In fact, you can get him to eject like even all the way over here, or all the way over here. It's just a lot more likely that he'll eject if you're in the dip. It's not 100% guaranteed that he'll eject if you're in the dip, but it's more likely. So what I suggest is just come here, make like a core save
Cortana
as
to
you
Fire
come
Team
in.
Zulu. I read you.
And
Cortana
if you
to
landed
Fire
it
Team
roughly in
Zulu.
the
I
gap,
read you.
most of the time he'll seem to
Cortana to
eject.
Fire Team Zulu.
Sometimes he'll do it like instantly, sometimes it'll be after the delay.
I read you.
Well, I have an intuition, a gut feeling that aiming at the Banshee matters.
I read you.
Like looking at him tends to make him eject faster. And where you look at him seems to make it too, like aiming here
I read you.
doesn't seem to work as well as like
Zulu, this is Cortana.
aiming over there. In my experience, you might find your mileage may vary. But after I land in the gap, I try to look at him.
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you.
It just seems to make it more likely that he'll eject sooner.
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you. Cortana to Fire Team
Now,
Zulu.
once he ejects, depending on exactly how the setup went, you might have a very, very short time frame to enter the Banshee, or you might have like a whole half a second or so. In this particular case, I think I've got like half a
Cortana
second.
to Fire Team Zulu. I read you.
No, actually, no, that's not true.
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you. Cortana to Fire Team Zulu.
But it doesn't matter if you accidentally flip him when it says press E to flip. It'll usually flip him back into position that you can still enter him. So what I like to do is I just mash E once he starts ejecting.
Fire Team Zulu.
And hopefully, if you time it right and if you mash the E fast enough, you'll get in the Banshee.
Cortana, hold position.
After
We're
that,
on
just
our
start
way.
driving this way.
Roger that. Make it quick.
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you.
So yeah, just practice this whole thing
I
from
didn't
this
think there were
particular
any human
checkpoint
forces
especially,
left on this part of the ring.
separately to practicing the first part of the trick.
Fire Team Zulu, this is Cortana.
I didn't
I
think
find
there were
this
any
the
human
easiest way to
forces
learn.
left on this part of the ring.
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you.
Another thing you can do
This
is
Cortana. Hold position.
stick the Banshee for a little
Cortana to
boost.
Fire Team Zulu. I read you. Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you. Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you. Cortana to Fire Team Zulu. I read you.
But I personally find this to
Cortana to
not
Fire
be a
Team
good idea.
Zulu. I read you.
Can give you a little boost here, but it'll also often get you killed. I've got Deathless on right now, so
Cortana to Fire Team Zulu.
I didn't think there were.
because his timing on when he ejects is random, you often also just miss with the
Fire Team
grenade.
Zulu. I read you. Fire Team Zulu, this is Cortana. Hold position. We're on
Just
our
barely
way.
lived there. I was like 2 shots away from
Roger
dying.
that. Make it quick.
Is this Elite up here? He'll shoot at you the whole time. And the Elite that was in the Banshee himself will also shoot as he's falling. It's kind of dumb. See his body down there. So it'll
Cortana
pretty
to
often
Fire
kill
Team
you.
Zulu. I read you.
It only saves like 1/4 of a second, so I don't recommend doing it. Alright, so now I'm going to show some successful examples of me pulling off the trick. Each of these usually will vary by the inputs by like a few ticks in each of the inputs, but you can see some of the successful combinations. I'll put on text whether I use the visual cue or the audio cue for them. I'm going to run through the 4 of them sequentially and then simultaneously so you can sort of frame by frame it. By the way, on YouTube, the comma and the period buttons will let you go frame by frame. And this is in 60 frames a second, so just keep that in mind that the game actually only processes inputs 30 times a second. You kind of gotta like count twice.
Interesting. The weather patterns here seem natural, not artificial. I wonder if the ring's environment systems are malfunctioning, or if the designers wanted the installation to have inclement weather.
This is Fire Team Zulu requesting immediate assistance from any UNSC forces. Does anyone copy? Over.
Interesting. The weather patterns here seem natural, not artificial. I wonder if the ring's environment systems are malfunctioning, or if the designers wanted the installation to have inclement weather.
This is Fire Team Zulu requesting immediate assistance from any UNSC forces. Does anyone copy? Over.
I didn't think there were any human. Interesting. The weather patterns here seem natural, not artificial. I wonder if the ring's environment systems are malfunctioning, or if the designers wanted the installation to have inclement weather.
This is Fire Team Zulu requesting immediate assistance from any UNSC forces. Does anyone copy? Over.
Interesting. The weather patterns here seem natural, not artificial. I wonder if the ring's environment systems are malfunctioning, or if the designers wanted the installation to have inclement weather.
This is Fire Team Zulu requesting immediate assistance from any UNSC forces. Does anyone copy? Over.
I didn't think there. The weather patterns here seem natural, not artificial. I wonder if the ring's environment systems are malfunctioning, or if the designers wanted the